Later on, Kevin demanded some more testing on this t-shirt, and lo and behold, they found DNA proof that they said, tied Kevin Cooper to this t-shirt. We don't know, because Kevin was wearing his prison uniform at the time that he escaped. We have no idea how he would have gotten some brown t-shirt or some beige t-shirt, but the police say that he somehow had this t-shirt. Now, according to the Ninth Circuit's dissent regarding Kevin's DNA on this t-shirt, long after trial, at Cooper's insistence, the state performed a DNA test on some of the blood on the t-shirt. Cooper maintained that the test would prove his innocence, which he said it would. Instead, the blood tested positive for Cooper's DNA. Cooper maintains, and still continues to maintain, that his blood was planted on the t-shirt. If the blood was planted, the only possible source was blood taken from Cooper by law enforcement authorities. A vial of blood was taken from Cooper by San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department's personnel on August 1st, 1983, 2 days after his arrest. That blood contained an added preservative called EDTA, and we wrote that presence of such a preservative would show that Cooper's blood was not on the t-shirt at the time of the killings. We directed the district court to test Cooper's blood on the t-shirts for the presence of EDTA. And this is actually one of the things that stopped his execution back in 2004, was more DNA testing. And now I should explain that despite the state's obvious manipulation of the testing protocol of this t-shirt, this is what is amazing in this case. They still, no matter what they did to try to get this to prove that Kevin was guilty, they accidentally came up with the proof that showed that Kevin was innocent, that that t-shirt was full of this preservative. And they panicked when they came up with these results that showed that there was a higher level of this EDTA on the t-shirt than it should have been. So the court allowed them to withdraw the results that proved that Kevin was framed up. And the only reason that they gave was that the lab had been contaminated. So we said, well, how was this contaminated? And they weren't made to explain. They said, well, it was contaminated, and we should just withdraw it, and it was fine. So again, going back to the dissent, it said, second, Jessica Ryan, one of the murder victims, was clutching blonde or light brown hair in her hand. And this was important because Kevin Cooper is black, and they thought that that was the murderer's hair in her hand, and this was blonde hair. We directed the district court to subject the hair to DNA testing. And the court goes on to say, there is no way to say this politely. The district court failed to provide Cooper a fair hearing and flouted our direction to perform the two tests. The district court impeded and obstructed Cooper's attorneys at every turn as they sought to develop the record. The court imposed unreasonable conditions on the testing the en banc court directed, refused discovery that could have been available as a matter of course, limited testimony that should not have been limited, and found facts unreasonably based on a truncated and distorted record. And it goes on to say that Cooper's blood, was found with the presence of EDTA on the t-shirt. Said the district court so interfered with the design of the testing protocol that one of Cooper's scientific experts refused to participate in the testing. The district court allowed the state-designated representative to help choose the samples to be tested from the t-shirt. The court refused to allow Cooper's scientific experts to participate in the choice of samples. Indeed, the court refused to allow Cooper's experts to even see the t-shirt. The state-designated lab obtained a test result showing an extremely high level of EDTA in the sample that was supposed to contain Cooper's blood. If that test result was valid, it shows that Cooper's blood had been planted on the t-shirt just as Cooper had maintained. A careful analysis of the evidence before the district court strongly suggests that the result obtained by the state-designated lab was valid. However, the court allowed the state-designated lab to withdraw the test result on the ground of claimed contamination in the lab. The court refused to allow any inquiry into the alleged contamination. The court refused to allow Cooper's experts to review the bench notes of the state-designated lab. The court then refused to allow further testing of the t-shirt, even though such testing was feasible. In other words, they know that Kevin Cooper was framed up, and they just allowed it to go through the courts. The Ninth Circuit even recognized that there is a level of white supremacy in this case against Kevin Cooper, and they said, This was amazing. After the court denied Kevin a new hearing, they placed at the end of their decision photo of the white family that was murdered. They had no reason to do this. They just wanted to show that a black man killed a white family. And the Ninth Circuit went on to say, the district court placed 2 photographs of the murder victims at the end of its 159-page order denying relief to Cooper. One is a photograph of the photogenic Ryan family, 2 beautiful children, 10-year-old brown-haired Jessica and 8-year-old blonde-haired Josh and their attractive parents. The other is a photograph of 11-year-old Chris Hughes, a handsome blonde-haired boy. The district court had no analytic reason to include these photographs at the end of its order. So then the dissent also goes on to say that there is substantial evidence that 3 white men, rather than Cooper, were the killers. Some of the evidence was introduced at trial. Some of the evidence, even though exculpatory, was deliberately destroyed by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and was therefore not available for use at trial. Some of the evidence, even Josh Ryan, the only survivor of the attack, first communicated to Deputy Sharp that the murderers were 3 white men. When Josh was in the hospital after the murders, he twice saw a picture of Cooper on television, and both times he indicated that Cooper was not one of the killers. Now, we know of a woman who came forward right after the murders, and her name was Diana Roper. And she was dating a man named Lee Furrow, who was he was my worst nightmare. Lee Furrow is horrible. He's a murderer for hire. He's a white supremacist. He had already been in jail once for murder, where he had hacked a woman to death. The night of the murders, he came home wearing blood-spattered coveralls, completely just spattered in blood. And Diana Roper turned these blood-spattered coveralls over to police, but they destroyed them because they already had Kevin Cooper, and they didn't want to do any testing that would contradict their idea that Kevin Cooper did this. So Diana Roper really worked with police at her own risk. She's gone now, she died of cancer, but she really put herself out there. And I want to read, I know, I'm sorry I'm reading so much too, but this Ninth Circuit dissent is so powerful. This goes on to explain how another man named Kuhn, who was friends with Lee Furrow, actually said that he was the one who murdered these people. He said that Lee Furrow himself and another white guy went there that night and murdered that family. After talking to prosecution, however, he recanted his testimony. So anyways, it says the dissent explains, in her 1998 affidavit, Roper stated, on Saturday afternoon, June 4th, 1983, Lee Furrow and I were at home getting ready to go to the U.S. Festival. Lee Furrow was wearing a medium-sized Fruit of the Loom beige t-shirt, which had a pocket on the front. This is exactly like the t-shirt that they found on the side of the road. I bought Lee the t-shirt at Kmart before June 4th, 1983. And I also recall telling the Sheriff's Department 15 years ago virtually the same thing regarding the t-shirt. During the early morning hours of June 5th, 1983, my sister and I had returned from the U.S. Festival and were in the living room. I received a telephone call from Lee about 1:30 a.m. in the morning on June 5th, 1983, asking me to come get him and another woman at the festival. I refused and hung up the telephone. A few hours later, a car pulled into our driveway. My sister went to the front doors to look out. I did not look out. A few moments later, Lee and this other woman walked through the front door. They were in a hurry. I heard the car depart. Lee was wearing long-sleeve coveralls which had a zipper in the front. The coveralls were splattered with blood, and there was horsehair and dried horse sweat on the lower leg area. He did not have the beige t-shirt or Levi's on that he was wearing earlier in the day. Lee walked to the back of the house and seemed to be in a hurry. Lee took the coveralls off and left them in the front of the closet. After he changed his clothes, Lee and this other woman left immediately on the motorcycle. After I learned of the Ryan Hughes murders in Chino, I turned the coveralls over to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, and I told the deputy the facts about how I found the coveralls and that Lee Furrow may be the murderer. Now remember, Lee Furrow was already a murderer. So I can't tell you guys how much I want you to read this dissent, because this just goes on and on and on for hundreds of pages of this kind of information.